Hello, and welcome to Teaching My Cat to Read, the very serious book review podcast. I'm Eli.
I'm Em.
And I'm Lottie. And this week we're discussing everything about Good Omens by Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett.
So, welcome to Series 2 of Teaching My Cat to Read. We never thought we'd get here.
Woo! Season 2.
If you're a regular listener, welcome back. If you're new, holy shit, how did you get here?
Yes, hello, welcome.
Just a roundup of what we're here for. We read books and we yell about them. We do a mix of classic literature and more modern stuff. We take absolutely nothing seriously. It's very important to remember that. And we ask the cat what she thinks at the end.
Yep.
The only other thing, I think, a reminder, this is not a spoiler-free podcast. If you check the description box, we should have some timestamps for the more spoiler-heavy bits. And usually we will flag in, speech as well if we're about to drop something we think is a spoiler. That is your introduction to episode 1 of Series 2, friends.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I'm so excited to read so many more books with you guys. It's just
we did all of our planning.
I keep looking at the list and being like, oh, we've got some good stuff coming. We've got some good stuff coming.
Yeah, we've already decided on all of the books for this season, and it's we've got some good stuff coming up. I'm excited. It's good.
Excited. So we normally kick off our episodes with a terrible summary, keeping in the theme of not being serious about this. So, terrible summary of Good Omens. What would you guys say?
Oh, I don't know. My best John Mulaney voice followed by, "There's an Antichrist loose in rural Oxfordshire. No one knows what the Antichrist is going to do next, least of all the Antichrist." Although, to be fair, he has been in rural Oxfordshire for 11 years, so, the bit falls apart there. But to start with, I think that works.
I guess it's not really a summary, but I feel it's such a pivotal part of the book, and I just want to say thank you to Queen or Queen's estate for letting them use their songs in the adaptation. Amazon must have paid an absolute fuck ton for those songs, and I'm so happy that they made the cut.
I do enjoy. That's one of my favourite running jokes of the whole thing. Is the whole every cassette tape left in a car turns into Best of Queen if you leave it long enough. That makes me.
They
very
didn't
happy.
actually explicitly say that in the adaptation, though. It's just unexplained that there's loads of Queen in the adaptation. If you've only seen the adaptation and not read the book, you wouldn't know that's why there's full of Queen.
It was a good time. So I am coming to this book as someone who I watched the adaptation on Amazon Prime last year. Was it last year? 2 years ago? Who knows? Time's a mystery.
Yeah.
And so I hadn't read the book before. So when Em and Eli were like, "Oh, shall we read this for the podcast?" I was so keen because I wanted to see how close it was to the book. So if you have watched the adaptation, I think that basically is the book. We're going to talk about that later, but just FYI, if you haven't read the book but have watched the adaptation, you'll probably get most of the points.
You're pretty much fine. I think it's more like there is stuff in the adaptation that isn't in the book more than there's stuff in the book. There's jokes in the book that aren't in the adaptation, I think, more, but there's actual plot stuff in the adaptation.
I mean, the book has so many footnotes. So, Lottie, as somebody who hadn't read the book before this, do you want to give us a run through of what it's about, what are the main characters, what are their goals, all of that stuff? Something we're trying to do a little bit more this season rather than just kind of
jumping straight in. Okay, how do we pronounce Az's full name? Because that is a question. As a dyslexic, I'm like,
I say Aziraphale.
I say Aziraphale.
Aziraphale. Okay, there we go. That's how it's going.
I go off of, at one point in the book, it says that he used the name Ezraphale as a pseudonym, so I go Aziraphale.
Yeah.
But
Aziraphale. Okay, so the point of this book is you have the Antichrist. So what's happened is 11 years ago, the demons and the angels have been preparing for the apocalypse by trying to either get souls for each their respective masters, so for, I guess, God or the devil, and in doing so, preparing for the apocalypse. So the apocalypse comes round, and one of the demons, Crowley, gets given the Antichrist to take to this, I guess, nunnery hospital, to hand over the Antichrist to who they think are the attaché of an American diplomat. So trying to get the Antichrist into position of power. And there's a bit of a mix-up, and the Antichrist goes to live in a small village in rural Oxfordshire with two, reasonably normal parents and lives a reasonably normal life. And as a result, shenanigans happen.
Yeah.
And fun shenanigans happen.
Basically, I realised this time that, most of the plot is, we lost the Antichrist. Everybody is trying to find the Antichrist. Meanwhile, the Antichrist is just like hanging out. He's just chilling. He's having a fun time.
I guess the book does have a lot of allegory to religion, but you don't seem that I definitely don't have like a deep understanding or knowledge of it, and it was fine.
This is my area.
I don't think you need that to like.
I know. I was like, I think I'm missing things in this, but it's good.
I'm going to quibble. I don't think it counts as allegory if like it's just what the Bible says is going to happen is happening. Yeah. I think that's just the Bible has come true. So
illusions. It's I think the word
illusions. Yeah. So it follows the rise of the Antichrist, who's 11-year-old child, and I guess the consequences of that of if you had an 11-year-old child as the Antichrist with all this power, like what kind of events would happen, because an 11-year-old is deciding that they want to do something and therefore that thing happens, and
all the plutonium goes walkabout from the power station, and now it's powered by sherbet lemons. Like
exactly. So part of the humour in the early part of the book is this dramatic irony that both heaven and hell are trying to exert influence over this totally normal kid who is actually not the Antichrist, but they think it is because of this mix-up.
Yeah.
And so they're both trying to make him be overtly influenced either by heaven or hell. But what happens is the Antichrist is actually just completely forgotten, grows up in Oxford, and is mostly influenced by humanity. And it's this sort of, the entire throughout this book is this running theme of like, well, there's heaven and hell and they're opposing each other, but actually, it's humanity with a steel chair, you know? It's they overlook that humans have the capacity for greater evil or holier good than either heaven or hell, because they have an imagination of free will. And like that's, I think, a direct quote from the book is that they're more capable of good and evil, and often the same individual is involved.
Yeah.
Well, because I obviously hadn't read this book before. I knew about it. It was on the like periphery of my sort of pop culture awareness. But when did you guys first read this?
Like, I put this question in the document and then realised that I don't actually know. It's been part of my consciousness for so long. And like I have, so in the foreword, it's all like, we sign a bunch of books that are like, they've been dropped in the bath. They're held together with string. They're the most overread books in the world. My copy is actually at that point. My copy is like, if I bend this open too hard, pages will fall out stage. So it was a long time ago. But I don't remember exactly when.
So the copy that I read in preparation for this episode was actually given, so it belongs to my spouse, and they were given it by their granddad, who was a pen pal with Terry Pratchett. And this copy is not actually signed, but it is like, I think it originally belonged.
Whoa.
Yeah.
How did I not know this fact? That is so cool.
My spouse has like signed like proof copies of some of the Discworld books. It's super cool.
Holy shit, friends.
Yeah.
Oh my God. That is a really cool fun fact. Continue.
And you know what's absolutely galling? I mean, we're getting off topic from Good Omens a little bit here, is that my spouse hasn't even read a lot of Discworld. So, absolutely
that is outrageous.
I don't remember when I first read this book. I feel like it was probably while I was in sixth form, because I must have heard of it through Tumblr, I'm sure. And
so I feel like it must have been a part of either my rampage through my family's Terry Pratchett collection, or part of my like late teens, I will read everything Neil Gaiman's ever written. And I don't remember which it was. Which kind of brings us on to the like, I haven't read very many, if any, other books written by two people. I think this is how you lose the Time War, but like that's like divided enough into like the two characters and their two letters that you could kind of see how that creative process might work. With this one, I'm just like, what the fuck did you do?
Because a lot of the sort of low level, like up close, the writing, the prose, the humour is very Pratchett-y, and then a lot of the broader scope and the plot is very Gaiman.
Yeah, I definitely felt that. As someone who's only read one other Pratchett and one other Gaiman book as a result of this very podcast. But it was kind of nice though. You could see influences of both styles of writing, but it knitted together really, really well as a cohesive narrative.
Yeah. I think there's only a couple of places where I was like, oh man, I can definitely without a doubt tell. And it was usually, I can tell Neil Gaiman wrote this because, maggots or some shit.
I think one of my favourite lines is this Antichrist who grows up peacefully in Oxford is called Adam, which I love because it's Adam is the sort of the quintessential human, right? The first man. Literally in Hebrew means a man.
Yeah.
And he's got these friends. He's got like the sort of very much based off sort of Enid Blyton, like the
It's Just William, I think.
Just William.
It was William the Antichrist was how it started out.
Yes.
Do you guys ever read Just William? Because those things are a trip.
One of these children is called Pepper, and it's because her full given name is Pippa and Galadriel Moonchild.
I love that.
And there's this line that I absolutely love, which I think probably was a Pratchett line, which is like, there was one of two ways that a girl could go with a name like that, and Pepper had chosen the other one. It's just so evocative in so few words. It's a bit like the Douglas Adams, like it hung in the air in the much way that a brick doesn't, or whatever.
Yeah. There's a bit actually that reminded me very much of Douglas Adams, where they describe like, so at one point the fourth horsemen show up, obviously, because it's the apocalypse. And there's a moment where they describe like Death getting out of his chair, and it's like a deck chairs on the shore of night unfolding. And there's a very like Douglas Adamsian image while still being like kind of terrifying a little bit also.
It's so evocative, the writing. Like I really enjoyed it, and I think that it was really, really enjoyable to read, even though I hadn't read the book before and had watched the adaptation, so I sort of knew where it was going. Like it was still a really, really enjoyable, fun read. So yeah, if you haven't read it, go read it.
I was like, I looked at so we have a planning document now. We're like adults who do things. And I saw that, Lottie was like, we want to talk about the language, the humour and stuff. It's great. And I was like, oh, cool. I will write down, whenever I notice a particularly funny bit, I'll write it down, right? Did I do that? I didn't. What I did write down, I got one of the whole way reading through the book. I wrote down one thing that I thought was really funny, and it was the description of Newt. I was like, this is how Newton Pulsifer looked as a man. If he went into a phone booth and changed, he might manage to come out looking like Clark Kent.
See, and then they cast Jack Whitehall in the adaptation. I'm like, Jack Whitehall is a perfectly normal, attractive actor, Yeah.
Yeah.
Like he's completely inoffensive to look at. Yeah.
What I loved was like the writing is also just it's so on point that like it's also kind of it is we're going to talk about this later on, but it is a critique of like the time the time it's set in, but like
it's such a perfect time capsule of the 90s,
Yeah.
It is, yeah.
I mean, the thing about this book is like I literally have a copy open in front of me. You can open the page randomly and find just a funny line. Like
it's just,
but it's never great. It's never over the top.
Yeah.
I was actually like thinking about the humor, and something I noticed like this time around that I think I appreciated maybe less when I was younger. And I think it's something actually that's like maybe a bit a result of us doing this podcast, is that my brain is like hooked on structure. But I hadn't fully recognized before how well the sort of I guess the sketches, if you want to put it, if it was a sketch show, there are whole scenes that are structured around a joke, or they're building up to a joke, and I hadn't, and they're not just gratuitous, they're there, they serve the plot, they're there, they're relevant, but like, I hadn't realised how well put together the things like the when the four horsemen are waiting for Death to show, or like the four horsemen are supposed to be meeting in a cafe off the M25 to ride out on their motorbikes.
Yeah.
And in the corner, there's a guy who doesn't speak, there's a tall guy who doesn't speak, who's playing a trivia game. And every time a horseman shows up, one of the categories changes to the name of the horseman. And there's build up and build up and build up. There's 3 horsemen in there.
And you're just like, when is Death going to show up?
When's Death going to show up? And over at the trivia machine, there's a bunch of bikers gathered around this tall guy playing the machine. And they're like, what year did Elvis Presley die? Oh, it's 1967. It's 1967. Just hit 1967. It's D. Do it. And they're just yelling at this guy. Yeah. And then the guy goes in classic Pratchett Death all caps. I don't care what the machine said. I never touched him. And it's just, oh my God, the payoff. It's so good. And there's so many like that, where there's like a whole scene just building up to these gloriously constructed punchlines. And as a writer, it makes me want to tear my hair out, because I'm just like, I'm never going to be that good.
It also calls back, that specific one also calls back to just earlier, where they go, Death doesn't have an address. You don't have to deliver, like they're delivering the weapons of the horsemen. It's like, he's everywhere. So, of course, they don't have to wait for him to show up. Of course, he's already there. He's Death. He's everywhere. So, like, the joke is also a very serious, like, a sort of very woven theme throughout the thing. And, like, if you look at the mirroring of Adam and his 3 friends, and then Death and the 3 other horsemen, like, they each have a counterpart.
Yeah.
And I really like that. So Death and Adam are mirrors because they are both real cosmic Like, death is not a figment, or he's not a personification of something that humanity has imagined or created, like war, famine, pollution. He's actually just intrinsic to the universe. And that's quite a nice mirror for Adam as the sort of, I guess he embodies life almost, right?
Yeah. And they're both angels in a way that the others aren't. Sort of. Yeah. It's interesting, actually, because I think they make a very nice contrast. Sorry, I'm going to run into the whole, like, being human-shaped makes you think human thoughts thing here. Like, so I think part of the point of, like, the reason Adam, like, grows up the way he does and makes the choices he does that, like, lead to the sort of resolution of the narrative are because he was brought up human, right? He's, like, he's, like, perfectly balanced between heaven and hell. He's got the free will, and he knows what he wants to do with it. And one of the ways I think that Death stands out from the other horsemen is that he's one of the few that isn't shaped by having a vaguely humanoid form and having been like what's-itted around in the minds of humans. Because the others, the way they talk, the way the other horsemen talk and the way they think about things
is human.
Is very human. Like, it's much closer to, like, one of the things I really enjoyed was this time around was the early scene where we get Crowley's introduction. The TV show ruined my pronunciation of Crowley and it's annoying me. But, like, you know, you get the Hasta and Liger, I don't know.
Liger, I think.
Who are, like, lurking with the Antichrist to, like,
I love the line about them lurking, by they it's something like, they were great lurkers. They could, how is it? If Bruce Springsteen had ever recorded Born to Lurk, these two would have been on the album cover. They'd been lurking in the fog for an hour now, but they had been pacing themselves and could lurk for the rest of the night if necessary. So
they're Olympic level lurkers, But, like, you hear them talk and they're like, oh, you know, Crowley's been up here too long, you know, he's gone native. And they will say things like, hail and well met, and discuss the dark deeds of the day. And they've had enough of a conversation to kind of establish that that's how they talk. And then Crowley rolls up, gets out of his car and just like, hi guys, sorry I'm late, traffic was murder.
Yeah.
And it's
like wearing
so
sunglasses
human.
at night.
Yeah. And like, and that the other horseman compared to Death is a very similar vibe of like, you know, I mean, Famine's got like, he's in his business suits, he's got an assistant, He's you know, he's does normal human things like tell people to cancel all their appointments, and War has her own job, and you know, there's all of this stuff where they just feel more human than Death does.
Oh, I tell you something that's just occurred to me about Famine.
Yeah.
Is that lack of access to things like poverty, famine, shortage is manufactured now. It's not actually the way that he has adapted is to start selling it, which is very true to our current world where we do overproduce things like food and housing. And the only reason that there is poverty is because it benefits somebody else.
Famine is essentially avoidable,
I was going to say, note, dear listeners, if you haven't read the book, we are now going to probably go more deeper dive into spoiler land.
Yes.
But just jumping off that, like, one thing I thought with the Four Horsemen was it Pestilence who has
he retired after penicillin. Yeah.
And it's like it was the way they introduced Pestilence was he's sitting at this table and they don't mention him by name, and this person comes over, but it just says a skeleton comes over to give this guy a book.
Oh, this is Famine.
Oh, this is Famine.
Oh, is that Famine?
Yeah.
And I was just like, why is there a skeleton? Oh, and then I was like, oh, it's a metaphorical skeleton because of the diet culture of the 90s. Oh,
I think the thing is she looks like a skeleton. She is just a walking skeleton because she has starved herself, you know.
My point is like in the 90s, like the model culture was to like literally see your bones. Like that was the desirable thing. If you look at the photos
Kate
of
Moss
models,
is probably fairly emblematic of that.
Yeah, like all that time, like they all just stop. And I was just like, oh, it's just perfectly encapsulates. Like I say, it's a time capsule into that time period of like, yeah, just commentary on that, and just it was just brilliant how it introduced it. It was like really like a slap in the face of reminding you going, oh yeah, it was that bad. Like,
I mean, I tell you what, that's one where I'm like, I don't know whether that owes more to Pratchett or Gaiman, because on the one hand, Gaiman is very good at scaring the living out of you. He's very good at making you feel dramatically, but also that turn on a dime thing of this is funny and now this is horrifying. Reminds me very much of things like of Terry Pratchett, of Small Gods, like that the repeated line in Small Gods of the a place for everyone and everyone in their place, referring to the Quisition, and you're like, oh boy, suddenly this isn't funny anymore. And that scene I think is very like, it's very much in that line.
Well, I think part of what makes those things so compelling and so they hit so hard is because the humanism of this book is such a major, major part of it. And like you can tell that both Pratchett and Gaiman just like people and get angry about the idea that people are being treated badly. And obviously that's what the Horseman, in particular in this case, like Famine, is doing. And so it's kind of, it's got that bite to it because they're writing about things that actually happen and actually make them angry. So, which is also how I feel.
Really striking to me this time, and I think I maybe just didn't pick up on it as much when I was younger, was the environmentalism.
And bear in mind, this was written in 1990, so we're 30 years on now.
Which, again, I feel like, I know we didn't invent climate activism or whatever. I know it's not a recent thing, and this is something that people have been talking about since, like, it's got to be like the 60s or something, hasn't it, really, with like the bomb and that, like CND and...
Oh, at least, like the 40s, I think,
To look back on that and kind of be like, oh yeah, there's all these interludes with like whaling ships and, you know, the deforestation of the Amazon and crude oil spills and...
Yeah, I mean, the whole swapping pestilence for pollution as... Which sort of, now reading that and you go, oh, you know, there's penicillin, so there's no more plagues as we sit here in the second year of this pandemic. But like, you know.
Orcs.
But on the other hand,
there's 5 horsemen
pollution
now,
and as a sort of wider part of climate change is also it's sort of equally, if not more, daunting right now. So, yeah.
No, it's a good time.
Sort of bouncing off that onto like free will and things like that.
Which is something that the angel, like Aziraphale and Crowley, catch from humans, which I think is really funny.
They went so native that they got free will.
There was definitely a comment on how it is difficult in a similar way to with The Good Place. Spoiler for Good Place if you haven't watched it. But like there's a commentary on nobody goes to The Good Place anymore because it's so difficult to be good, because the way it's rigged against you, if you buy some tomatoes and the tomatoes are made in or they come from Brazil and it's on the plane and that's caused climate change, like that's bad. But how are you as a consumer meant to like change that and sort of those small things? But I thought it was very interesting how...
That's the low-level tarnish that Crowley manufactures, isn't it?
He manufactures that sort of low-level annoyance, and I thought the beauty of the one with the M25.
Oh, yeah.
When he the fact he made the M25. So if you're not from the UK, you're like, what the fuck is the M25?
It's
the
M25
hell.
It is hell. The book is not exaggerating.
It is a motorway that goes around the edge of London.
It's a ring road.
God knows who designed it. The ring road.
Well, Crowley.
But it's a motorway of 4 lanes. And it is a nightmare to try and get on, off, around. The signs are all over the shop. Sometimes there's lanes closed. Like there's normally an Audi going up on the outside lane at like 95. Like it's just a stressful time. And it just made me chuckle. I was like, yeah, I've driven around the M25 now. And it was not a fun time.
So the gimmick there is that Crowley like engineered the creation of the M25 so that it actually is in the shape of a demonic sigil. And so not only is it sort of a misery to drive on, but also every single time that people drive on it and are pissed off, they're feeding into this like water wheel of evil. And then later on he's trying to go around the M25 in his Bentley that's on fire, like desperately trying to get to Tadfield, this place in Oxford where the Antichrist kid lives, and he's hoisted by his own petard because he was the one who designed the M25 and now it's causing him problems. I quite like that.
It's only just occurred to me, actually, that is a prime example of... So there's a couple of times in the book where Aziraphale is like, evil always contains the seeds of its own destruction, and no matter how clever the opposition is, evil will always self-destruct eventually. At that point, I think they're talking about having lost the Antichrist, and Crowley's like, for my money, it was just average incompetence.
Yes, yeah.
But the M25 is a prime example of evil containing within itself the seeds of its own destruction.
Well, to be fair, he makes it, right? He gets there in the end. And like basically so we didn't actually really talk about this, like, so the wider plot of this book is basically Aziraphale and Crowley are desperately trying to find the Antichrist, and there's this whole sort of comedy of errors as they're trying to like find him and like keep missing him and stuff like that. And at the end of the day, they really have actually no impact on whether or not the apocalypse actually even happens. Apart from Crowley happening to hand off the Antichrist to the nun who like fudges the switch off of the babies. Like they have actually no impact on the plot whatsoever. It's so funny. It's just that these two supernatural homosexuals just running around being extremely funny and doing nothing.
Yeah, I definitely think like when I was reading this, I definitely preferred reading at as is Aziraphale. Him and Crowley, like, I love reading their interactions, and I definitely preferred their bits over the kids, but I don't know if that's just because I really, really love their interactions. It's not like it's like sort of one's better than the other, but it was just so beautifully done.
I tell you what I wonder is if the kids bit is funnier if you have kids. Because it rings pretty true to me, like the kid personalities. That feels very true to life. But I have a similar thing where I'm like, I do not care that much about the children. Yeah. Despite the fact that they are the ones that actually solve the problems in the end. I am much more interested in Aziraphale and Crowley just up constantly.
Do you know who I also don't care about in this book, unfortunately, is Newton Anathema. I really like. I could really just not.
I hate that whole subplot. I hate it so much. Like it's just, like you. It's just what does it bring? Okay, so this is the thing that gets me. Since I've been talking about structure, what does that add?
Heterosexuality.
What does that interlude? So for details for our listeners, the overarching kind of, I guess, framing narrative is that in 17th century Lancaster there was a prophetess called Agnes Nutter. And she is the only accurate prophetess in the whole history of Earth. An anathema is a witch and her descendant who has inherited her book of prophecies that, explain how Armageddon's going to go down, basically.
Will also specifically only relate to her descendants. So, on the day that JFK was shot, the prophecy for that day is about a house falling down in King's Lynn.
It's like one of her descendants will in King's Lynn or some...
Yeah.
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 But yeah, and so there's Anathema, and then there's Newt, who is now a witch finder, but the other thing that he is just like any technology he touches just stops working, which is plot relevant. Anyway, he shows up in Tadfield to try and find the Antichrist. Anathema is already in Tadfield trying to find the Antichrist and, avert the apocalypse. Well, I assume so. It's never actually made clear because, the book seems pretty adamant.
She's just kind of following the prophecies. If the prophecies told her to help it along, she probably would, right?
Yeah. So that's kind of that's a bit.
Because I think what they add is they add to the overall theme of screw destiny. You can choose your own destiny. Maybe it's written somewhere, but maybe it's written differently somewhere else in bigger letters underlined.
I don't. I think lots of places. There are lots of places in the book where I think that there are things that make that clear. I think shagging some random dude because a book of prophecies from the 1600s tells you to.
God, talk about compulsory heterosexuality, right?
If she looked at him and went, "Oh man, I'm into this," that would be one thing, but the fact that she kind of looks at him and goes, "Oh well, it could be worse," and still sleeps with him. It's so uncomfortable.
That is not a solid basis for a relationship.
I don't think that's fair to the heterosexuals.
But it is weird. It definitely didn't sit right with me. I don't know. I guess as part of her character is that she follows these prophecies to the letter and is so reliant on them that she won't have. In some way, I guess it comes back to the thing of free will. Does she have free will if she's just following these prophecies around everywhere? I don't think.
I guess if you contrast it to I think this actually counts as a spoiler, but at the end of the book, Anathema gets a second book of prophecies delivered, and they burn it because do you want to be a descendant for the rest of your life? Which I think, contrasting with the earlier example, tells you that she does have free will. At any given point, she could have burnt the book.
Yep.
She could have, which to me is okay, it's a really cool moment. It's a really cool character beat. I don't think it needed the unnecessarily squicky heterosexual, weirdly dubiously consented sex to hammer that point
hard
home.
Agree on that one, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
But yeah, whatever. I tell you what, that one I'm in two minds about who I think is responsible for that, because Terry Pratchett and heterosexuality, I'm generally unconvinced by his main couples when that's a thing. But Neil Gaiman, he veers between either I'm convinced and it's fine or everything is horrifying, and I'm not really sure which of them to blame for this.
God, Carrot and Angua is a bad thinking about Terry Pratchett's couples.
Cheery is right there. Angua should be dating Cheery. What's the...
We'll get to this when we read some watch books. Yay! But yeah, so the whole Newton Anathema thing, I'm just I can understand the themes that they were put in to illustrate, but I don't think it was, particularly the sex bit.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It doesn't. It's not needed. I don't know if it's just a product of the book aging. And this is the same with the adaptation, actually. Was the Witchfinder and the lady who lives next door.
Oh, Madam Tracy, yeah.
Yeah, like calling her like a Jezebel and a whore, like, I don't know, it didn't sit right with me. I thought it was really insulting. I don't know why. I was just like...
So here's the thing. I'm watching House at the moment, and House and his boss, Cuddy, have a very similar dynamic.
So I don't know if that's just me or if it's like...
I don't know. I feel like...
But it also fits with their characters. It also fits him...
Yeah, this is the thing. I feel like, firstly, I want to say, I think it comes off better in the book because you are in their heads. And you get that kind of like... Firstly, I don't think Madam Tracy really puts up with it. Like, if she thinks he's out of line, she will tell him. But like, I think the other thing is that in the book, it leans very heavily on this idea that like Shadwell isn't bigoted. He just hates everybody. Which, okay, I know this is a stupid trope that people use as an excuse for their bigotry a lot, but it does. Yeah. It's very like. The way it's played in the book is it's this kind of low-level grumpiness that picks the lowest common denominator as a form of expression rather than being... And also, like, he is problematic. It takes him until, like, he has a dream about, like, Agnes, like, burning at the stake to actually realise that maybe burning people at the stake is a nasty thing to do. So, like,
she had a pretty easy go of it as far as getting burned at the stake goes.
Yeah.
So this is the witch who wrote the prophecy book. She filled her underwear with gunpowder and nails when she was about to go and get burned.
So she blew up the whole village, which...
She turned herself into a pipe bomb, which is actually, if you are going to get burned at the stake, the correct way to do it to not have a really, really awful death.
Yeah.
And also, like, that's what you get, suckers.
But morbidity aside, yes, Shadwell.
I have less of a problem with the character of Shadwell. And weirdly, I have less of a problem... with the relationship, and I don't really know why that. I can't put my finger on why that is. Their relationship bothers me less.
They're both so obviously middle-aged. Like, they're both unequivocally adults who have the ability to walk away at any point. That you just look at them and you go, well, I don't get it, but clearly they're having fun. So there's not a power imbalance.
Honestly, the thing it reminds me most of. And I think maybe this is why I'm sort of okay with it, actually, is it, and not in any of the character particulars necessarily, but maybe the dynamic a bit and how it's quite awkward to start. It reminds me of early Guards, Sybil and Vimes, actually, in that the first couple of books, I don't really get them, you know?
Yeah,
I think it's cool that Vimes is clearly like chugging his respect my wife juice constantly. But for a couple of books... I really do feel like that's all the relationship has going for it. And the further you get through, the more you get to see like the little details and how they live together and how that works. You know, you get the day-to-day of their domestic life where they've kind of settled into it. And I'm like, okay, you got me. You convinced me. But the first couple of books, I'm like, it's fine. I don't get it. I don't know why these two people have gotten married, you know? And I kind of got that with Shadwell and Madam Tracy. So I think maybe that's why I'm more comfortable with it. Because I'm sort of like, okay, if we're playing this like Vimes and Sybil, they're going to even out into a relationship that I think is cool, you know?
Yeah. We just don't get to see it go that far because it's one book.
Yeah.
I tell you what, the other reason that I think I really struggle with the other relationships in this book, so Shadwell and Madam Tracy and Anatha and Newt, is why would you give a second thought to those when you have the epic, like, millennia-spanning cosmic romance of Aziraphale and Crowley, like, falling in love over 4,000 years?
Yeah.
Like, they were together in the Garden of Eden and they're together now, and it's just like, I love it. And, like, their interactions are so sweet.
I'll tell you what it is. It's a prime example of lazy heterosexuals. Right? This is another justice for straight people moment. Because both of the het romances in this book are relying on you to just go, he was a boy, she was a girl, can I make it any more obvious? And Aziraphale and Crowley, by virtue of their non-canonicity, are very much like, no, actually, you are going to have to see how this works.
Well, okay, so they basically all but canonized it in the show, right? Like, I think Neil Gaiman has pretty much said they are in love with each other.
And he's also said that they can't be queer because they don't have genitals. And I request that we don't include Word of God Neil Gaiman on this because
that's fair.
Every single thing he says about this drives me up the wall, and I just want him to stop talking about it now.
I think he rather wishes people would stop asking him.
Well, then he can stop answering. He has
I know.
Sorry.
Also, it's kind of like you wrote the book. It's not only you wrote the book, but like I, as the token straight, like I'm like they're clearly in love with each other.
Yeah.
Like you replace one of them, and if you replace one of them who presented as a woman and one was a man, they would be in a romance at the end of the book, no questions asked. Like, and it's frustrating.
So this kind of brings me on to like the adaptation and things that I actually genuinely did like about it, which were like all the extra Aziraphale Crowley material. I think is gorgeous and I adore it.
Also, David Tennant's Crowley and Crowley's gender presentation is just
like the whole like
kiss.
gender switching stuff is like it's great and I love it. And the other thing I think is that Aziraphale, they really leaned into Aziraphale as a queer narrative, and I really liked what they did with that in terms of the like the disapproving family, that you're never going to be what they want you to be, that how difficult it might be to break away from that. All of that stuff.
Can I just bring a little bit of cursed intertextuality into this discussion and talk about Supernatural?
No!
Where you've got gay angels who have to subvert the narrative and, forge their own path. Anyway, it's a compelling narrative is what it is.
Speaking of, actually, if we're going to talk about Supernatural, I want to go back to talking about free will again, actually.
Yeah.
Because, like, I think it's one of the things that I found really interesting on this reread was the premise of the, like, why is free will good? Like, what is it for? And the answer that, like, multiple different protagonists come up with independently is it's more interesting this way.
Yeah. Well, what else is there?
And that's, I thought, is really interesting. Because, like, obviously, on the one hand, I think it does lean into the whole, like, if you don't have free will, it's just people as things.
Yes.
Again. Like, that whole bit where the them are like, we don't actually want cowboys and police officers to play with that you can just put away at the end of the day. That's uncomfortable.
Well, that's what stops Adam when he's about to turn into, like, the evil Antichrist, is that what's the point of friends if you can make them do whatever you want?
Yeah, exactly.
Which is, like, this is why I think God made people, is because God was bored and lonely, you know?
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting because I don't think I've ever seen it expressed quite like that before. Particularly, I actually want to contrast it to Supernatural. Like, we're ignoring everything after season 5 here, folks. I know there's fun with the, like, metatextuality and, like, the narrative breaking stuff and, like, actually God was rewriting it the whole time and all of that stuff. But, like, end of season 5, they defeat the Team Free Will. They're literally called that. Defeat the apocalypse. Yeah. And the angel turns to the one survivor and is like, this is what you wanted, right? No eternal hell, no eternal heaven, just more of the same. And it's played as this, it's like ambiguous whether that's a good thing. You know, it's very like, you're going to have to keep doing your daily miserable grind of fighting vampires and whatever, and nothing's ever going to change. As opposed to the Good Omens thing of free will is what makes things interesting. Free will is what makes, like, the world an exciting, interesting place to live. And you would be bored. Like, that's one of the main arguments that Crowley uses to try and convince the angel to, like, try and thwart the apocalypse. Is you'll be bored. You'll be so fucking bored. You'll have to watch The Sound of Music constantly. You'll hate it.
So one of the things I love about that conversation is there's this rhetorical device about how long sinners will suffer in hell, right?
Yeah.
And it's about the whole, the bird flies to the mountain and sharpens his beak, and then 1,000 years later he comes and does it again. And by the time the mountain is worn done to nothing, you still won't be a fraction of your time through. Except Crowley does the exact same thing, and he goes, by the time the bird has worn the mountain down to nothing, you still won't be finished watching The Sound of Music. And I just, as somebody who viscerally hates The Sound of Music, I absolutely love that. Just
and
like,
that's the thing that convinces Aziraphale. It's such a good character thing. I love it.
Just like a really undeserved dunk on The Sound of Music. I'm just like, yes, I love it.
on the adaptation note, so for new listeners, we do sprinkle through the episodes. Well, I say we're going to sprinkle them all at the end, I think. It's like asking really fun questions. So I think, yes, adaptation, loved it, but who would be the only human in the Muppet adaptation of this book?
See, I have more opinions about who would be which Muppet than I do about who's.
Oh, I'll go for it. I want to hear the Muppet opinions.
Okay, because I think Aziraphale and Crowley are Gonzo and Rizzo.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that right now. They're the, like, slightly outside of the narrative. They're the ones that know what's going on. They're the ones doing all the funny commentary. I think that's a choice. Also, Gonzo's whole, like, a rat and a whatever gender mood, I think, is very fitting. I am in two minds about which couple should be Kermit and Miss Piggy.
I think Adam's
it's probably
parents.
Newt and Anathema, but
Yeah.
See, it's interesting because every character, there's no odd characters out. Every character has a counterpart in this book. There's no single characters. You know, there's Aziraphale and Crowley, and there's the Horseman and Adam and his friends, and there's Shadwell and Tracy, and there's Newt and Anathema. They're all paired off in some way.
yeah,
I would say like God, but you never see God.
that's true. I think, I tell you what, it could be really funny, kind of like so one of the questions we like to ask is, you know, where would you put an F-bomb in this book? And I love that canonically Aziraphale is the one that gets the F-bomb in this book. That makes me so happy.
Yeah.
But
It's when he's getting discorporated, right? He steps into the circle and just goes off.
The summoning circle, yeah. So what I'm thinking is, on a similar line, you just have one random human. No one with like cosmic significance or anything. Just like
I know. Look, you know the guy who when they're all going to the airbase, and there's the guy who's
R.P. Tyler. The neighborhood watch guy
who's like complaining about like everything to the
He's the
yeah. I think he should be the only human, and then like it's all like the Muppets going to the airfield to like prevent the apocalypse, and he's like, "You children,
so your car is on fire."
Yeah.
That's another joke that I think is just so perfectly constructed. I love it so much.
Yeah. I was going to say about the adaptation, I love the fact that they use the Queen songs, because I think in the book, when you're reading it and it talks about the different songs that Crowley's listening to, that it is actually quite evocative of like his personality. I feel like when you were talking about when he meets the two other demons and they're like hail, and he's like, oh hi guys, stuck on the M25, like he comes in listening to Queen, and David Tennant plays it so well in the adaptation, but it just, when I was reading it in the book, it's that music played in my head because it's so well known. And I think, I just think it fits his character. It just gives you this image of like, this is the kind of person he is because he listens to this kind of music. Yeah. And the fact he has like a really old Bentley.
He's such a dork. He's never bought petrol in the full 60 years he had this car, except once to get free James Bond bullet hole transfers for the window. You're like, you could literally steal those. You're a demon. What the f*** is wrong with you?
Or you could get like real bullet holes, but he would never do that because he loves the Bentley too much.
Yeah. Also, it's just the fact that he loves this car, and they're like, why do you love the car? And like, he clearly takes pride and joy out of looking after this vintage car, and he doesn't quite really need to.
His equivalent to Aziraphale's whole food thing, I think, is that Aziraphale has the like, if there's no sushi in heaven, I'm not going. Yeah. And Crowley's like, if there's no perfectly maintained by magic vintage Bentleys, you know.
Yeah. I was going to say off the adaptation, but who would you fight if you could fight one character? Who would it be you would want to slap in the face?
He's so greasy. I think I don't want to touch. It's not in a different way to Mr. Collins. I don't want to touch. We're bringing back the Mr. Collins beating pole from season 1.
Yeah. From season 1, episode 1, no less.
Nothing like a good long callback.
Yeah, like I feel like Shadwell is like chip grease. And Mr. Collins is just, you don't even, I don't like, I don't know.
It's soul deep is Mr. Collins.
Shadwell is at least like good salt of the earth grease, you know? It's not...
it's mostly nicotine. Yeah, there's no one I'm really like...
Do you know who I would punch? From the adaptation, John Hamm's Gabriel. John Hamm's Gabriel.
Of course.
They got John Hamm to play him, and it is the perfect casting choice.
Oh, he's so awful.
It is so good. Yeah. Every single scene he's in is just a delight.
He's so loathsome. It's one of those, it's just so much fun. I love it.
I rewatched a bit when he goes into the bookshop and starts like, oh, what do humans like ask for? Pornography. And he's like, I'm just asking about my pornography. Like, it just...
And Aziraphale's like, yes, great, you're blending in so well.
So well.
Also, I love that's the main reference I think we get to the fact that like Aziraphale's bookshop is in Soho, and all the other bookshops are like adult bookshops.
Yeah.
And, I did not twig that.
And like, there's a running joke about like interesting Soho night people, and like how Aziraphale's bookshop maybe doesn't fit quite, apart from the fact that he obviously fits very well in.
Yeah, that's the whole thing about like Aziraphale is like an elder queer. you know, and it's the fact that his bookshop, he's chosen Soho for it. I just, I love him.
Yeah. Well, like, I think that's another thing that I think the adaptation makes more explicit than the book, is that Aziraphale is very deliberately choosing to present as an old queen, right? Like, that is very, like, I mean, I think in the book you still get the, like, I'm the Southern Pansy. But, the book is very, like, it's a bit more understated, and I think in the
they lent into it for the adaptation, but like, it's nothing that wasn't there. They just made it unavoidable. You know, and like he calls Crowley like dear, you know, all the time. Like that is, especially between. I mean, I don't know how much that has changed as a piece of vernacular between 1990 and now, but I feel like now it's even more. It's more obvious that that's an like not an affectation, but it's more marked now than it might have been back in the 90s.
Okay. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. I say, well, actually, that reminds me of the joke that I didn't get for ages when I was young, that I think it took like several rereads before I twigged. The conversation where Aziraphale and Crowley have gone to Tadfield to try and work out what happened to the Antichrist that they lost all those years ago.
And they hit Anathema
and
on her bike.
They run into Anathema with their car. And but they're having this conversation, like she's like very kind of understandably quite nervous about getting in a car with them when they offer to give her a lift home. And like as she's leaving, Crowley says, "Oh, get in the car, Angel. We're busy. Get in the car."
Yeah.
And she's like, "Oh, well, that changes everything." Of course, she was perfectly safe. And in my head, I'm like, "Oh, Anathema's a witch. She knows that they're actually angels and demons, and they're not interested at all in."
Doing a mischief to her.
Abducting random young women. It took me several years. And the, like, consenting bicycle repairman line as well, to be like, oh, no, she thinks they're queer and that means that, they're not a threat to her. And I was like, I get it now. But, like, the first couple of times I read that, sweet, innocent baby M was just like, oh, she can just tell that they're supernatural entities that aren't interested in that kind of thing. So it's fine. No.
Oh
no!
She thinks they're homos.
Anyway, yes, we are running through the We need a Gothmog rating.
I was going to say, new listeners, old listeners alike, it's time for the rating of the book that we think our cat would give this.
There are no cats in it.
No, there are dogs.
There's a hellhound.
Well, there is crime. There is crime. They did.
There is definitely crime. I feel like Crowley, like obviously his the animal that he is represented by is a snake, but I feel like there's also a lot of like he's the
He
a cat person,
for a full century. That is cat behavior.
I mean, it's also like snake behavior, right? They sleep for a long time. But I mean, I want to say 10 out of 10 just because I love this book so much, and there's so much stuff we didn't get around to talking about that I adore about it, and but I don't know if that's authentic to the cat.
I think she'd love it, even if there are no cats in it. I think if we're gonna, because our cat rating normally, is there a cat in it, and is there crime in it,
stabbing,
and is there sneakiness and stabbing with tiny little claws?
None of the stabbing is very cat-like, is it? Really?
It's backstab. Is there any backstabbing?
I mean, kind of, but like, is it really backstabbing if you dump a bucket of holy water on some people that are coming to collect you for torture?
God, we didn't even talk about the whole phone lines thing, and oh my God,
man.
There's so much in this book. You've got to read this book if you haven't read this book.
I want to talk about the whole weaponized pedantry thing because I think that's really
funny. We just have to write it up on the blog.
I feel like I'm gonna argue for that. There is a cat-shaped hole in this book, and what that is represented by is the fact that when Aziraphale and Crowley eventually then like move into apartments next door to each other, they have a cat between them.
Yeah.
I feel like
their cottage on the South Downs.
Yes.
I would definitely give it like a 9 out of 10. I think she'd give it a 9 out of 10 -1 for the lack of cats.
Yeah, lack of explicit cat. Yes.
I hate to say it, I am leaning towards something more like a 6.
Ooh.
Like there's a lot of crime. There's a lot of shenanigans. I don't disagree with that, but I think it's too busy. I think she'd find that annoying. Secondly, there isn't any actual stabbing. There isn't actual petty violence. I think them are very much the shenanigans that they get into are dog shenanigans. As evinced by the fact that they have a dog.
And they also is a dog in it.
Yeah. So I'm kind of like, I adore this book. For me, it is, unrateable because it's just that it's so good. You couldn't put a number on it. But I think
you've got to preserve. Yeah. We've got to preserve the integrity of the cat rating scale.
Yeah. But I will fully accept being outnumbered
No, I think I just was saying, because you have a valid point. I think the kids are more dog-like in their shenanigans. Whereas,
and I do tend to forget how much there is in this book, because all I think about is Aziraphale and Crowley, and then there's like all the other stuff that I care less about.
Okay, you know what we can do? We can just write a very, very just a long blog post of all the other bits that we didn't mention in
There's so much in this book. It's like it's so short to read.
What we could do is because we have 5 wildcards. We have wildcard episodes this season, friends. If we wanted to do either an extra Good Omens episode or a Good Omens adaptation specific
that'd
episode,
be fun.
That's an option that's available to us.
You know what we could do? Dear listeners, if you want us to do that, let us know. Email us, DM us, spam us on the Tumblr, whatever various social media that we've now signed ourselves up to. Yeah. Goodreads group. We've got a Goodreads group now. But yeah, we'll get onto that a bit in a minute. But like, what else have you guys been reading?
I'm reading for the podcast. I tell you what I watched the other night with the housemates that I have that are not M is Train to Busan, which is a zombie movie, Korean zombie movie. Absolutely incredible. If you like zombie media, give this a watch. It is just a top tier, incredibly well executed example of the genre. Like, didn't expect to cry. I cried. Incredible movie.
Nice.
Yeah.
I know what I'm doing. I was rereading Lord Seventh by Priest. It is a web novel about, largely about like how do you pick a good emperor in a tense political climate when everybody is awful, and what are you willing to do to make that happen? But on the other side of it, it's about a guy who's like been stuck in this soulmate relationship for 7 lifetimes, and the guy has killed him in all of them. And in his 7th lifetime, he wakes up back in his first, and he's just like, "What if I just napped instead?" And it's really funny. Like, it's one of the most enjoyable takes on the whole, like, oh no, I have to fake being my younger self when I woke up back at the beginning, kind of. Which you see in fan fiction a lot, I think, as like a fix-it trope. Mm-hmm. And in this one, he's just like, well, I could master being, pretending to be a 10-year-old again. Or I could just sleep all the time and never speak to anyone. And then I'd never give myself away. And he was like, galaxy brain take from Lord Seventh here. It's really funny.
Also, like, by that point in your soul, you're really old, so all you want to do is sleep, right, as well?
Yeah. There's a lot of, like, how much of this is, like, a strategy and how much of this is a depression nap as a result of the previous 6 lifetimes. Like, it's the prequel to the book that Word of Honor on Netflix is based on.
Okay.
So if you enjoyed that, if you enjoyed that, you may not enjoy this because I think it's actually darker. But yes, nobody in this book is a nice person. However, it is very funny and I'm enjoying it immensely. So
how about you, Lottie? Have you been reading anything else?
I am reading Conversations with People by Sally Rooney just because I've seen it everywhere on the Bookstagram. Yeah. So that's quite an interesting read because I normally live in Fantasyland and it's just fiction, sort of it is, I guess, a commentary of normal people's lives and the sort of things they talk about. So it's quite an interesting book to read just because I haven't really read anything like that in so long. And I'm appreciating the fact it is quite like a well-written book, even if it's like not really deep in it's not world building like fantasy. It's just very normal. So yeah, it's a nice change. That's it. Cool. I'm just reading for the podcast constantly on.
I've heard a lot about Sally Rooney and I've never actually managed to read any of her stuff, so I might have to put it on my list.
Fun fact, if anyone is also in the UK, because I don't know how it took me so long to realise this, but if you look at your council's library, and I imagine it's probably same thing in other countries as well, but at least in the UK, in the county council where I am, you can rent ebooks for free.
Oh, that's really cool.
For 2 weeks.
Borrow them, like a book from the library.
Yeah, I think I've heard of that as an alternative to book piracy, actually, because it's still free to you, but the authors do get money the more their books get borrowed from libraries, at least in the UK.
They also have audiobooks as well, so it's not just ebooks, but you can also get audiobooks off them, and I know audiobooks in particular are quite expensive to get a hold of. So if you're someone who likes listening to audiobooks but maybe can't afford to get them all the time, have a look and see what you can rent and not rent, borrow from your local library. And it also helps encourage people to use libraries, which is always a fun time.
I want to go to local library soon.
But you don't have to go in, in the pandemic, if you don't want to have to go into a library, you can still use the facilities. So yeah, it's a nice 50-50. Yeah, so
all right.
Yeah, I guess we probably should wrap this episode up, shouldn't we, guys? Otherwise we're gonna...
Do we want to say what we're doing next time?
Yeah.
Wuthering Heights, baby.
Yes.
Some unhealthy relationships.
Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte.
Lottie has been live texting me her responses to this book.
Oh
She's
my
very
God.
angry, y'all. You're in for a treat.
So many thoughts. I'm not annoyed at the book. I'm annoyed at pop culture.
I haven't even started reading it yet, and I'm already angry. I already hate all the characters, so you know.
Like it's kind of yeah. I have many thoughts and feelings about it, but yeah, Wuthering Heights, a classic novel. So yeah, if you're new, we tend to alternate between modern and classic books. But as we mentioned earlier in the episode, we're going to throw in some wildcard episodes this season. So series, which one's a British series? And like they are wildcards. We might talk about adaptations. We might talk about things we've seen that are literature related, but not about a specific book. So if you've got any ideas,
I want to talk about like war literature or something.
Yeah, like if there's anything that you guys think, oh, I really would like them to talk about, like this topic, genre, something like that, then send us an email. teachmycattoread@gmail.com. Add hello there so we know you're not spam. Or you can DM us on Instagram or Twitter and Tumblr. I think Tumblr has a DM thing. And make sure to follow us so you get all the behind the scenes shenanigans of everything that's going on. And we are on Goodreads. And not only that, we now have a Goodreads group. So you can connect with other fans of the podcast.
Still can't believe there's more than like 2 of you.
And it's also, it's a private group. So we will just batch accept people just to make sure we don't get loads of spam. I think it's just a bit easier that way for everybody. But yeah, like follow us, add us, like things. Make sure to subscribe or follow us on your podcast platform so you never miss an episode. And if you like this episode, please consider leaving us a review on your podcast platform. That would be, it makes us so happy. So yeah, say hello, send us a message and recommend us some books to read. Big virtual hugs and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.